First, accountability. On day 20, I predicted Saudi Arabia would initiate back-channel talks. What actually happened? Pakistan emerged as the primary mediator, hosting Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt in Islamabad this weekend. Different country, same dynamic. I predicted Trump would signal an exit. Instead, he announced a ground invasion plan. I underestimated his strongman reflex. I predicted Houthis had a 40% chance of entering the war. They fired missiles at Israel on day 29. It happened faster than my model expected. Overall, the behavioral engine was 70% directionally correct. But here's what I missed: Trump isn't looking for an off-ramp. He's looking for a climax. Let me give you the raw numbers. 30 days of war. 1,900 to 6,500 people killed in Iran. 13 American service members dead. 19 Israeli civilians killed by missile attacks. Iran's missile capability is down to 33%. Their drone launches have dropped 73%. 17 warships destroyed. But here's what hasn't been destroyed: Iran's ground forces. 600,000 troops. Their underground bunker networks. Their speedboat swarms in the Gulf. And their most powerful weapon, the Strait of Hormuz, effectively closed for 4 weeks. Only 6 ships have made it through. Oil has surged over 50%. The global economy is bleeding at a rate that no country can sustain. The next 4 weeks hinge on one decision: does Trump seize Kharg Island? This tiny island handles 90% of Iran's oil exports. The Pentagon is preparing what they call weeks of limited ground operations. Trump told the Financial Times on Sunday he's still considering it. Here's what my behavioral model says. Trump's approval is at 42%. 84% of Republicans still support the war. His base rewards escalation. He needs a climax, a dramatic moment he can call the greatest military operation in history. Kharg Island is that moment. I give it 55% probability. But Iran has fortified it with 30 to 40,000 troops, landmines, kamikaze drones, and anti-ship missiles. If America goes in, expect 50 to 200 American casualties. And Iran will retaliate with everything it has left. Subscribe to Tatveda. I'll be tracking this week by week as events unfold. Whether or not Kharg is seized, weeks 5 through 10 are the grinding phase. Nobody wins. Everybody bleeds. If Kharg is taken, America faces what I call the Fallujah effect. In Iraq 2003, Baghdad fell in 3 weeks. Mission accomplished came 6 weeks later. Then the insurgency began. Iran will turn Kharg into an Iranian Fallujah: IEDs, sniper teams, drone swarms. 2 to 5 American casualties per week. At home, 74% of Americans already oppose ground troops. The political clock starts ticking louder. If Kharg is not taken, the air campaign enters diminishing returns. Most military targets have already been hit. A strategic pause emerges, not a ceasefire, but a reduction. Either way, oil stays above $100 a barrel. India's rupee, already at a record low of 94 against the dollar, keeps falling. Europe scrambles for summer energy supplies. Let me show you how the behavioral engine works. Every leader has a primary drive and a deepest fear. Trump's primary drive is legacy. His deepest fear is humiliation. These two forces pull in opposite directions. Legacy wants the greatest victory, humiliation fears another endless war. Vahidi, the IRGC strongman, has one drive: institutional survival. The IRGC must survive regardless of what happens to Iran. So every decision Vahidi makes optimizes for the IRGC, not for the country. Netanyahu's drive is political survival. A ceasefire that leaves Iran's regime intact means his domestic critics win. So he will try to sabotage any deal, but only until the cost of sabotage exceeds the cost of accepting it. MBS of Saudi Arabia wants his Vision 2030 legacy. Every day of war threatens it. So he becomes the mediator. The person who ends the war gets the biggest prize of all, the peacemaker's premium. By week 11, the war has lasted 100 days. That's when the convergence happens. What's convergence? It's when enough actors' behavioral profiles simultaneously align toward stopping. Trump needs to lock in his victory narrative before the midterm campaign. Vahidi's military is down to 15 or 20% capability. MBS's window to claim the peacemaker brand is closing. Pakistan has positioned itself as host. The framework that emerges will look something like this: America declares military objectives achieved. Iran declares survival is victory. Hormuz reopens in phases under international escort. Nuclear inspections begin but solve nothing. The IRGC survives. No regime change. And here's the key: what's not in the deal. No full nuclear accounting. 440 kilograms of enriched uranium remain unaccounted for. That's enough for 1 or 2 nuclear weapons. This becomes the crisis after the crisis. The ceasefire holds on paper. Reality is messy. Hormuz reopens to 60% traffic. Oil drops to $85 to $95. Markets rally. India's economy stabilizes. But inside Iran, the real war begins. Mojtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader, son of the assassinated Khamenei, is a figurehead. Vahidi has the guns. Pezeshkian has the popular legitimacy. It's a three-way power struggle, and history tells us exactly how it ends. The IRGC always wins. Always. After the Iran-Iraq War in 1988, after the Green Movement in 2009, after every crisis, the IRGC consolidates power. Meanwhile, Netanyahu launches covert operations. Mossad assassinations. Cyber attacks. The shooting war is over, but the shadow war begins. November 2026. U.S. midterm elections. This is where Trump's war legacy faces democratic judgment. Republicans frame it as, "We destroyed their military." Democrats counter, "Nuclear material is missing. Gas prices are still high. What did we actually win?" My behavioral model shows a familiar pattern. When Trump is cornered in polls, his strongman reflex activates. Watch for an October surprise, a dramatic action designed to change the narrative. Maybe a strike on a suspected nuclear site. Maybe a hostage rescue. Maybe a dramatic diplomatic announcement. Whatever it is, it serves one purpose: shift the conversation before Election Day. My prediction: Republicans lose 15 to 25 House seats. Standard midterm loss, amplified by war fatigue. By January 2027, the war is over. Nothing is resolved. China has invested $20 to $50 billion in post-war Iran. Belt and Road enters Iran at scale. Russia deepens its military partnership. Iran tilts decisively east. Western companies are locked out. The proxy network reconstitutes. Hezbollah rebuilds. The Houthis resume Red Sea posture. A new generation of leaders, more radical, more anti-Western, takes charge. And somewhere in Iran, in an underground facility that the IAEA cannot access, there is enough enriched uranium for 1 or 2 nuclear weapons. Nobody knows if it's been weaponized. Nobody can verify. This uncertainty is the single most dangerous legacy of the 2026 war. This conflict doesn't end. It transforms into 6 parallel wars. First, the nuclear shadow war: Israel's Mossad versus Iran's hidden uranium. Second, Iran's succession crisis: Mojtaba versus Vahidi for control of a traumatized nation. Third, the Gulf realignment. Saudi Arabia builds its own security architecture, reducing dependence on America. Fourth, the global energy restructuring. Every country that depends on oil through Hormuz now knows it can be closed. A $500 billion diversification wave has already begun. Fifth, proxy reconstitution. Hezbollah, Houthis, Iraqi PMF rebuild with deeper anti-Western commitment. And sixth, the India-China divergence. China invested billions in post-war Iran and holds over 90 days of strategic reserves. India has about 70 to 75 days total, but only 9.5 days in government-controlled strategic reserves. The rest is commercial stock held by oil companies. India is below the IEA recommended 90-day minimum, and the Hormuz crisis exposed just how vulnerable that position really is. So where does this end? My weighted prediction for January 2027, 35% chance of a fragile ceasefire with an IRGC-dominated Iran and nuclear ambiguity. 25% chance of a frozen low-intensity conflict with periodic flare-ups. 15% chance of a negotiated settlement with partial nuclear inspections. 10% chance of Iranian revolution or collapse. 10% chance of escalation to broader regional war. And 5% chance of an Iranian nuclear weapon test. The most likely world in January 2027, the guns are silent but nothing is solved. Oil is at $85, permanently higher than the $72 pre-war normal. Iran's IRGC controls a traumatized nation. Trump has moved on. And the enriched uranium sits in an underground facility, waiting. Wars don't create new problems. They reveal and accelerate existing ones. Every fault line exposed by this war, American overextension, Gulf vulnerability, Indian strategic weakness, Iranian nuclear ambiguity, Israeli-American divergence existed before February 28, 2026. The war just made them impossible to ignore. The people haven't changed. The map has. I'll be tracking these predictions week by week, comparing them against reality, and updating the behavioral model as events unfold. If you want to see whether this simulation holds up, subscribe to Tatveda and hit the bell icon. I personally reply to everyone who engages with these predictions. Drop a comment. Which phase do you think we're entering next? Like this video if behavioral simulation is a better way to understand geopolitics than cable news. Share it with someone who needs to understand what's really happening. This is Arun, and this was Tatveda.